Please take the roll.
Commissioner Capitan,
Here.
Commissioner Peterson,
I am here.
Commissioner Grinberg,
Here.
Commissioner Sherling,
Here.
Commissioner Breitling.
Here.
And at this time, Taylor will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So Commissioner Peterson is joining us online today, and I am going as Vice Chair of the County Commission. I'm going to chair this meeting because it's just easier that way to do it in person, so I keep an eye on all these screens in front of me and this beautiful audience. So at this time, I hope that you've had an opportunity to review the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve or any corrections or additions?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. And you have in front of you the order of the agenda. You note that we have one item for a vehicle leasing agreement that we are going to delay until the next meeting. So I would look for a motion to amend the order of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. And the consent agenda. Is there any additions, corrections to the agenda, the consent agenda, or a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Breitling,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Grinberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Capitan,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherling.
Yes. And the motion carries. At this time, we would look for any member of the public that's in the audience that would care to address this board. You are free to do so at this time if you are not on the agenda already. We rarely get any takers, which is so disappointing. There's so many things we could talk about. But, all right, let's move on to the regular agenda. Item number 1, we will set a public hearing for a MIDA bond host approval for the YMCA. Mr. Jim Stewart, please join us. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jim Stewart. I'm an attorney with Thornton Stewart and Wagner in Fargo. We're representing the YMCA of Cass and Clay County in connection with a bond issue to finance a daycare facility in South Fargo. The bonds are proposed to be issued by the City of Frontier because they're a qualified small issuer. They expect to issue less than $10 million this year so they can designate these bonds as bank qualified. However, the project is outside of their jurisdiction, and so we're requesting Cass County to give host approval to the project and to conduct a public hearing at your June 19th meeting. We'll have a representative of the YMCA at that meeting. They'll be able to answer any questions about the project. If you have any questions about the financing, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anyone have any questions?
No question on the financing, Mr. Stewart, but is there a location then somewhere in?
There is. It is 5107 30th Avenue South in Fargo. The amount of the proposed issue is not to exceed $8.5 million.
Any further questions for Mr. Stewart? Or a motion?
Move for approval. Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Sherling,
Yes.
Commissioner Breitling,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Grinberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Capitan.
Yes.
And the motion is approved. Thank you. See you next month. Okay, item number 2, road rights of way, public hearing and resolution. Mr. Stamnus is going to present this item. And
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My name is Matthew Stammes, work for the Cass County Highway Department. Just a county engineer. I'm assigned to the FM diversion, and at a commission meeting on April 3rd, a public hearing was scheduled for May 15th. This public hearing is meant to discuss the resolution to take over the right-of-way and closure of the roads 38th, 13th, 26th, 21st, and 64th for the FM diversion project. At this time, I would ask that the hearing be open.
Okay. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to address this board in regards to this particular item for public roads of way, road right of way? Any member of the public? Then I will close the public hearing and move on to the commission. Do you have any questions for Mr. Stamnus? Any questions for Mr. Stamnus? How many of these have we done, and how many will we continue to do?
Oh gosh, how many have we done? I think 5 or 6. I think we've done
Jason's
so
got a
far.
big smile on his face.
That's what I was gonna say, is 5 or 6.
As my answer last time, 3 that we have yet to do, but you'll be seeing me 7 more times, because this one's for the public hearing right now from what has previously been asked for. 3 more public hearings will be requested, and those requests will be 3 more public hearings themselves. And then in addition to the public hearing for the county road that has yet to happen on June 1st.
And are we having any issue with keeping on schedule with these?
We do not, we have not as of yet, so.
Anyone else have any questions or motion?
I suggest, I move that the suggested printed motion be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Capitan,
Yes.
Commissioner Grinberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherling,
Yes.
Commissioner Breitling,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. We will see you again.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item number 3, the Grand Farm project update. Lloyd Nelson from Emerging Prairie. Welcome, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner, Commissioners. My name's Lloyd Nelson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Emerging Prairie and Grand Farm, and we just wanted to give a quick update as to where we're at with the Grand Farm project. As you're aware, we did pick a site selection process, and we picked Castleton, North Dakota, and we acquired some land last year. And we've been in the project stage of planning and then breaking ground to build the road in there, and then excited to get going again this spring. But one of the components that we needed to take a look at was actually creating a minor subdivision for the property, for the buildings that we're looking at putting on there. So we've been working with Jason and some of the various county people in the township as well to get a minor subdivision, which will be coming before the Planning Commission here in May, and then look forward to representing that for you at the meeting in June. If we could go to the next slide, really taking a look at where we're at to date. So we've been focusing on the north side of the property. So what we're calling the Innovation Shop, it's about a 25,000 square foot facility. About 13,000 of it's related to just a kind of a farm shop. So working on equipment, those types of things. Really the other side of it is designated as a presentation space. So as you take a look at it, where we can host events, 150, 200 people then come out there. We also have training facilities, some offices in the building. Boardrooms so that we can cater different events coming in. And we really look to be part of the community. So we've talked with the community of Castleton of, can they make some use of the space as well? So if we can go to the next slide. Here's you're really starting to get a view of what we were looking at as far as the overall concept for it. And we'll get to some of the others later. So the time frame, we took a look at. So here, if you're looking at the first picture, in the upper left side there, that's kind of the look from the southern exposure to the plaza area. So we're going to have a demonstration space. So if we've got autonomous equipment or other type of technology that's out there, we'll have an outdoor kind of theater type space where people can, watch what's going on. The whole northeast quadrant of the property is just designed so that we'll be able to observe those types of things. You get a sense in the upper right picture of what the entryway is going to look like. So coming in, a very warm, welcoming environment, kind of a pre-hosting type space. And then the lower left shows the presentation area where we can bring a combine in or a tractor or something like that, or have larger groups, again, up to 200, 250 people where we can do a presentation. And then you're just getting a south look showing all the windows and stuff as you're coming in. As we take a look at the overall project, happy to say, we've achieved our first fundraising on this. So we feel very confident in finishing up the facility. We've got the funds set aside for it. Overall, this first part of the project is going to be about $14 million. And we've achieved that in our fundraising. So we're feeling good on that. And then we'll take a look after we get this one done for a level 2. If you want to click forward. So a timeline, we did the initial groundbreaking last fall. We're literally just starting up again this spring, still pretty damp out there. I got some updated pictures today. We are doing some road work, but we had dug a pond onto the property. It's a borrow pit so that we could use some of the dirt there. And so we had to pump that out so we could go get some more dirt to continue going the road. We're also digging another pond on the property for a wetland mitigation. We were told by our engineers it'd be a lot simpler if you would just pay somebody $25,000, $30,000 and go buy some wetland somewhere else. And we said we didn't want to do that. And we said as a research group, we really want to do this ourselves. So we've contracted and actually are doing our own wetland mitigation on property. We hope, with a good summer, fall, that we can be done as early as next April, May, probably time frame to be fully up and operational with the facility. So we're pretty excited. And then just a few other pictures on here to give you a little closer look at some of the renderings. Maybe. There we go. So here again is taking a look at the plaza. So you can see that, coming down into the plaza where we've got some concrete space building into the landscape there. The entire building has got to be up. We're raising it about 5 feet. One of the things that Jason warned us about was, with the potential for flooding. So we worked with the engineers, took a look at all of that. And Jason said, kind of historically, everybody, if you build 2 feet above the roads out there, you should be in a good spot. We thought, well, you know what, we'll be a little bit better. And we went up at least 3 feet above the road. So we're bringing the overall facility up a good 5 feet. Next picture, please. Again, this is just the southern exposure as you're walking in. The thought is that there'll be some native plant grass and stuff like that coming in. We'll have parking, about 111 parking spots on the north side up there, which we think will be more than fine for what we're taking a look at doing. We have talked with the township. They had some concerns about if there was going to be, up-facing lights or anything like that. And so we're being very cautious on, the light that we're doing. It's all down-facing and all those types of things. And this gives you a look from inside, kind of this pre-meeting space going out. We haven't signed off 100% on the wood, but we like it, but it's a little higher budget, so I've got another few weeks before we make that final decision. But again, a very warm, welcoming type environment for our partners, for the local community members, for farmers as they're coming in, and international delegations, because we are working with close to 20 different countries around the world now. And here is just another, again, view coming into the entry space as you're walking in. And you can see the view through, again, trying to make sure we have plenty of light coming into the facility. Just the interior presentation space. I think that's probably the last one. Oh, one more. So with that, just want to give a high-level update, let you know, at present, we're on schedule, we're on budget, and we're on time. Well, again, we'll be looking to come forward next month as we take a look at that minor subdivision to make sure we get that approved so we can keep going.
So what do you envision? I know you have a lot of plans for the site, but just specifically, that looks like a wonderful, welcoming area to do presentations. What kind of how often do you plan to do presentations, and what types? And
Yep.
Can you just dive
Sure.
into that a little bit for me?
So I think, you know, there's a number of them. There'll be several very large events through the year. So we have our Autonomous Nation or our Cultivate Conference. So we do 4 or 5 major events a year. We'd expect that a couple of those will be out on the farm. Some of them will be very much here in downtown. We love downtown, so we'll keep doing those. You know, our TEDx that we're currently doing on the emergency prairie side. We'll also have many smaller meetings out there, so think of groups of 20 to 30, whether they're startup vendors, whether they're farmers, whether it's corporate, you know, executives coming out there. We're working with a tenant now who intends to bring out 100 farmers a day for 100 days to be able to come out and see some of the technology and things they're working on. We'll have our test plots out there, so we'll have good activity. You know, I would expect that through the course of the summer, we should have, you know, well over 5,000 attendees from a Grand Farm side. And then with our tenant, there could be another 5,000 that would come out to the Castleton area.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Any questions?
Robert has to say.
Robert.
Just gonna, with setting up your own certified wetland area, that's a classification and a status that can be high in demand for a number of other projects. Are you building in excess capacity? Are those going to be marketed, or are you strictly for your own requirements there?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Commissioner. Now, as we look at it, you know, strictly for our own use, we've also talked to the state of North Dakota. We've got the Wheatland Channel that comes across our property, monitoring the water as it's coming into the property, monitoring the water as it's coming out. We're also working with Ellingson for ditching on the property or tiling. And then they want to bring in a system where they can monitor water, those types of things. And then in the other pond, they actually want to be able to control the water level on that. And then we're thinking, well, maybe we could do a little bit of irrigation right around the building or something. But in answer to your question, the wetland itself is geared towards what we need to have, and we're not looking at marketing it or anything.
Maybe the follow-up to Mr. Wilson's question. You had noted earlier is 25,000 square feet
Yes, sir.
and 14 million budget.
Plus or minus, yeah.
That's about $560 a square foot. Would that include a lot of this land and?
That does include the land. And so, you know, the land purchase that we had includes the engineering costs and everything else. I think.
And the wetland, any construction around wetland or?
No, we have a lot of dirt that we need to move, and then we're going to dig a hole. But I mean, it's not going to be, the actual wetland mitigation is probably going to be about $100,000.
That's, I mean, it's a big number for square footage. You look at breakdown by cost. I was just intrigued by that. So.
It's fairly high tech, so it's not your typical farm shop. And then as we start looking at the presentation space, and I've got more than $250,000 just in audio visual as an example. So.
Any further questions? Well, it's an exciting project. It will be fun to see in person
Yeah.
when it's completed next year.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your
Thank you
time.
for joining us.
Mhm.
Item number 4, the West Metro Perimeter Highway Study. Mr. Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Wanted to discuss today the West Metro Perimeter Study with MetroCog. I outlined quite a bit of it in my memorandum, but I've got a presentation to hit some of the highlights. So starting next slide. So this really looks kind of the study area. So from south of Fargo along I-29, then going around the south side of Horace, looking going around the West Metro and then up towards Argosville area. Next slide. And this is the actual study map. So study area, it's not set that it has to follow the exact alignment, but that's the general corridor that they're looking at. Next slide. So looking at some of the historical information on the need for bypass around our metro area, in 2014, MetroCog did a study, and this is part of their every 5-year study where they look out 25 years for transportation. And a level of service LOS of F is a failing, failing grade. So they were looking at that time in 2040, that you'd have a lot of congestion in that I-29, I-94 corridor. We started looking at other options. Next slide. And then in our 2018 comprehensive plan, this concept got further developed and was put into our plan. So it looked at, the new changes in the FM diversion project. So looking at that 100th Avenue or County Road 14 corridor south of Horace, just north of the diversion staging area, and then also looking at the potential of using that corridor along north and west of the metro area for where the FM diversion is, because that would already be a controlled access corridor, because there is only 4 crossings at Highway 10, Highway 20, Highway 22, and Highway 32. So you would in essence be making a fairly low access facility. Next slide. And this was then the latest transportation study that was done by MetroCog. Their 2045 transportation plan also highlighted this concept. Next slide. And this concept was taken then into the Northwest Metro plan, where this Northwest Metro study was completed several years ago, looking at the future growth plan, knowing that once the FM diversion's in and the areas north of Fargo and West Fargo are going to be more developable, start to be able to plan for those corridor changes in that area. Next. And ultimately, we anticipate, growth out on that, just east of that diversion alignment. Next. And finally, we're just finishing up the FM MetroCog interstate operations study, and that study looks at everything from a wide variety of interchanges in the metro area on I-29 and I-94. It looks at the main interchange between I-29 and I-94, but then it also looks at other concepts. And so in that study, it spelled out the need for bypass options around the whole metro. And that's not just for traffic congestion standpoint, but also for safety standpoint. If there is if there was a major, say a massive accident with fuel tankers or something like that on the flyover on that top ramp on I-29, and it shut down traffic, we have a plan. We have an emergency operations plan to detour traffic around, but as our community continues to grow and grow, having other alternatives for those emergency operations is good to have too. Next. And then finally, it showed this interstate operations study showed that, especially on the west side, that this could, by that 2040, 2045 time, easily be handling about 5,000 vehicles a day, which right now the only road that we have in Cass County that handles that type of traffic volume is down in Horace on County Road 17. So, while this one thing that came out of the study is it's not necessarily going to significantly reduce the number of trips going through the metro area on I-94 and I-29. It would, again, basically be one of our top, if not our top, traveled road in Cass County, this whole west bypass. So with that, Cindy Gray, prior to her just retiring, she had made a big push to move this study along. The study won't be completed until 2024, but I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention, and then with that, this will be getting added into the 2024 budget with MetroCog to provide our local share. And really the key to this study then is it takes us to that next step to where we can then request planning funding through the different federal highway grant funds that are out there. So we could more, take whatever comes out of this study, take it to a more detailed plan, and then if we get those planning grant funds, then also take it further to request funding for larger construction grant. So kind of a long step in this process. We've been at this looking at this concept for about 8-9 years right now. So it's good to see that we're continuing to chip away and keep moving this along. And I think another piece to the need for this is within the next few years, we are going to start making some decisions on that excess land on the west side of the FM diversion that currently has the potential to be utilized for this project. But that decision is going to have to be made in the next couple of years. So we want to have the right planning tools in place to make sure that we're making the right decision, because that in itself could be a multi-million-dollar decision. If those lands are sold and then it comes back 5 years later that, hey, we need that land and now we have to go reacquire it, that would be a significant cost to the taxpayers. So with that, the motion is to authorize $50,000 in this. Again, it's for the 2024 budget. It doesn't have an impact on this year's budget.
Thank you. Yes, I fondly remember hearing this called the Benson bypass back in the day. Somebody came up with this idea anyway. I think it's very, very timely and really important since there is excess land since the diversion is purchased, and to have to dispose of that, which we are going to do. It's not, it's certainly not the diversion authority's intention, at least from my perspective, to own land any longer than we have to. So at some point that would be put on the market, and then to acquire it later would really be expensive. So this is an important time to consider this. Right now, people are constantly taking the shortcut from Argusville, through somebody's township road and through a field. And I mean, I got all kinds of calls, as you know, this winter about people that are stuck when they take an alternate route, whatever their Google Maps is telling them to take. And so I think this would be really, really important, and also from a safety standpoint. It would certainly get people around the metro quicker. The intention of interstate highways is not to move local traffic, but that's exactly what happens in our metro area. And we're all guilty of taking I-94 to get home. If you live in West Fargo and you work here, that's probably what happens. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's money well spent. But who's got questions for Mr. Benson? Chad does. Commissioner Peterson.
Commissioner Sherling, thank you. You stole my thunder on the Benson bypass. Yeah, as a reminder, and to those folks that weren't here, as Benson said, we met with state DOT. It's a good 6 or 8 years ago, and part of the dialogue was this, and they seemed at that time to acknowledge this need, or at least, at the very least, the need for the study. Beyond that, though, I think that we need to keep our legislators in tune with this as well, and I know you will, Jace, but it's going to be imperative the state is educated on this, and obviously with our friends in the legislature that go out there every other year, the more they know about this, the better, because a lot of the times this isn't top of mind for those folks out there. So as this progresses, again, as Commissioner Sherling said, this is a needful thing. It's perfect timing, but again, as it progresses forward, need to make sure we keep all of our partners educated, because again, this isn't going to be something that we're going to be building directly. We'll participate in, right? But we're not going to build it directly. So our state partners need to very much be engaged in what our decisions are and as to the rationale behind them. So all hail the Benson bypass. Thanks.
Any other questions or motion?
I have a question.
Commissioner Brightling, please.
We have, the language says authorize adding to a budget that doesn't yet exist. I would prefer that the motion read, move to encourage adding $50,000 to the 24 budget, rather than authorize, because we haven't approved the budget yet.
So I'm going to look to Ms. Madriga. Is there a reason for this language, or what would be the best route to go? Sure.
Madam Chair, maybe while she's looking at my thought process behind that was that way, when it comes to time for budgeting and you see the 50,000, it's, oh, that was already authorized, so it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be something that would get pulled from the budget, because it is something that we would need to have budgeted for our cost share with MetroCog.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Commissioner
I wasn't going to vote for this because I'm not convinced that this is a direction, at this point, at least what I've learned, to set in motion. But I could live with Commissioner Breitling's motion to tie it to the budgeting process because I need to learn some more. And we have issues with most of our roads. And now to start going down a path to build more, it just doesn't make logical sense to me at this point. So, and we've been around with the diversion authority enough. I think this needs to be vetted there too. So this might be the cart before the horse to some degree, but I can support Commissioner Breitling's approach to this, not just straight up voting for it.
Question for Mr. Benson. Does MetroCog need more than what Commissioner Breitling is suggesting?
I
to
think
move forward?
for the study, it would be, I think it would be better to have it more formal now, but I think, could it work that way? I think that potentially, but I'd rather see it more formally agreed now, so that way MetroCog has surety that from a funding standpoint.
And this is a study, it's not approving funds to construct at this
It's
point.
approving the commitment of $50,000. And I have a problem with that, we don't have a budget yet.
And Madam Chair, I think in the past, we've done, a number of these, and I feel confident that, from our overall, our budgeting standpoint, that there'll be funding available for this. I think it's enough of a priority, and I completely understand Commissioner Grinberg's point of view, but I think because of the timing of the where we're at with lands with the FM diversion project, I think it's really important for this study to at least identify what those needs are. Again, because if it identifies, and this might be something that, because I have continued to have discussions with the past DOT director and now Ron Hinkie, the new DOT director. Unfortunately, his deputy director for the DOT, and I'm forgetting her name right now, but she left last fall, and I'd been working with her. So there's a potential that this could end up being ultimately something that the DOT, we have more collaboration with them, but to keep this study moving forward, it's critical. So that way, just from identifying, do we need 200 feet of right of way? Do we need 400? And ultimately, maybe a different alignment is better. But we've seen with all the funding that's out there through through federal highway and some of the other grant opportunities that are there, failure to keep this moving along, I think will have the potential to have a lot more financial risk or financial costs in the future years if we don't at least move the study along.
I would agree, as chair of the lands committee for the diversion, I think, they are really churning ahead full steam, and they need direction. And if this could provide some added direction so we don't have an opportunity to slip through our fingers, I think it's really, really important. But with that, I would look for the motion.
Madam Chair, for purpose of discussion, I would move to authorize adding $50,000 to the 2024 Highway Department budget for the West Metro Perimeter Highway Study with MetroCog.
Thank you. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Now, further discussion. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Grinberg,
No?
Commissioner Capitan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherling,
Yes,
Commissioner Breitling.
No,
and the motion carries. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing more about this. When will this get started?
Shortly here, yes. And I think the expectation is that these studies usually take about 9 months to a year, so sometime next summer
Okay.
is when.
And the new MetroCog person starts when?
started on the 8th.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and just hang in there, and we'll talk about the winter 2023 conditions update.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I know there was some discussion back in, at a commission meeting in early April, and then we were doing flood fighting. And so I wanted to provide an update and just, discussion on kind of the overall, as we've rolled everything up, and where we're at with some of the impacts and as well as some of the costs. So first, I've got a presentation that covers a number of our weather and snow conditions. So on the left-hand side is March, and on the right-hand side is April. The top is temperatures with the blue, dark blue being the actual temperature range, high and low for each day, and the light blue is the band of normal. And then on the bottom is the precipitation, and the green bars are every day that we end up getting some sort of precipitation event. So you can see through March, we had a lot of back-to-back fairly consistent snow events, just adding to the snow that we already had on the ground. Next slide. And when we looked at winds, for each calendar day where you see the red is gusts in that 20 to 40 mile an hour range. So we had a lot of back-to-back days where we had high gusts, then we were out cleaning roads, then the next day, high gusts again. So as soon as we'd get something open, it was quickly getting blown back in, and which really impacted a lot of our east-west roads, especially the area north of I-94. Next slide. National Weather Service provided this for me. So where you see number 2 is that there was the second highest snow total of record. 3 in Castleton was the third highest snowfall of record in Castleton. The 4 by Chaffee, that's their fourth highest record. So kind of a Bermuda Triangle between Mayville to Georgetown to Castleton. So covering that north, especially northeast part of Cass County, all the way, really everything except for the kind of the metro area where Fargo had its 10th snowiest year. So I think this really shows that while it was tough around the metro area, it was really tough out in the areas that, in some of the areas that I know there's a lot of phone calls from the Page, Hunter, Argosville, north of Castleton, those areas. And those are really the areas that we saw significant drifting, significant issues on our roads. Next. And with that, we also had extremely cold. So, for Fargo, it was the 5th coldest March, April, and the second longest number of days of below 40 degrees. And for snow depths, the 5th longest with days, for a number of days, more than 12 inches. So I think the bottom bullet here that was really critical is that for Fargo and most of the communities in the Red River Valley, because it was so cold and snowy in March, by the time we got into early, through the month of March and through early April, the snow hadn't melted. We hadn't had that, multiple 30 to 35, 40 degree days to really consolidate the snowpack. So we went into April with pretty much an unmelted, unsettled, and still blowable snowpack. So we were still fighting that 20 plus inches of snow. Next slide. And then, it didn't impact just our county roads, but, when it comes to the interstate system, the interstates were closed 27 times for a total of 430 hours. And that, especially the impacts that were in through the Castleton area, 994, we were fighting worse conditions as you went further north, and there was higher snow totals up towards Arthur and Hunter in those areas. Next. Obviously, I had a lot of public comments, a lot of negative comments about, access to roads. But at the same time, we did receive a number of positive comments, especially those folks living off of our county roads in those rural areas where they saw us fighting through to get them access that they could get in and out of their places. And as you saw, with some of those record totals, we had a lot of comments about this is, as bad as 2007 or as bad as 1997. And now looking back at what just the National Weather Service just put out for those snow totals, a lot of areas it was a top 3, top 2 snow event year. So those were definitely, the people that were making those comparisons to 97 were probably spot on.
Madam Chair, I know Commissioner Breitling had a conversation with, I think out at a highway meeting regarding these snow fences on the interstate. I'd be curious to know how many times Interstate 94 was closed in 1997 and 2009 compared to this year. That's kind of evidence that these steel fences are creating more of a closure potential because of wind and snow. For what it's worth, I know Commissioner Breitling, you had a conversation with somebody out there that maybe we'll have an update sometime in the future with DOT.
Hopefully we will, in the DOT.
Continue, Jason.
All right, thank you. Next slide. And then I've got a number of pictures of just some of the challenges that we fought. We typically don't have to get out and use contracted dozers, but you can see this is County Road 2, that top left picture. That's not pushing snow off to the side of the road. That's pushing snow down the road. That's how much snow was covering the road. That's the type of, and Blaine and Tom are here. Blaine has stories about basically going through snow caves where we'd punched holes down the road, whether it's 8 feet of snow on either side, and the wind was drifting over. And once you got into it, you're hoping you're lucky enough to get out without getting stuck. And next slide. So that was County Road 2 up in the east of Hunter. This is County Road 2, I think, west of Hunter. Next slide. Oh, and one of the things that if you go back, Catlin, on the lower left, you can barely see the kind of the side blade of the motor grader. So that motor grader sits about the top of it is about 12 feet up, maybe even more, 12, 15 feet up. So you can see that a drift on the north side of the road of about easily 8 feet. Next. County Road 6 out in the Chaffee area, so both on the gravel and the paved section of road. This is Blaine's, that upper left is, Blaine took that picture from his pickup, sitting in his pickup, looking south to where the railroad tracks are. You can see how high that snow is. Next. And County Road 32 out in that Amini area. Next. County Road 34 between, so kind of north of Argusville out towards Arthur. And the left picture was a fairly common event this March and early April where our operators are pushing snow, and all of a sudden there's a vehicle that's just sitting in the middle of the road. So then, waiting to clear the road, but you can see the drift on the left-hand side of that where it's as tall as the pickup. Next. And then another one at County Road 34. So I think the main message, I just wanted to do a follow-up based on, now that we've kind of been able to roll up all of our costs. We've already applied for funding through the state's, the legislative snow funding that was passed and with emergency clause, and that funding is getting processed by the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services. So that's 2 pots of money. One pot was for the 1st of October through December 31st. Then the second pot is for 1st of October through the end of April. So we've submitted for that first pot of money, and now at the end of this month, we'll submit for the second pot of money. And as I mentioned in my memo, we are, if we're able to get some of that funding, we should be looking at somewhere at 141,000, and then hopefully we'll get maybe another 100,000 out of that next batch of funding for that longer period. But the one downfall with that longer period is you're competing with more entities across the state, because more and more people got where maybe they didn't have as much of an expense those first 3 months of the winter. Especially as tough as it was for March and April. I know a lot of townships are submitting, may have not submitted for the earlier October through December timeframe, but they will be for the second batch of money. And that's a smaller amount of money. So with that, again, I just wanted to provide an update and make sure everybody was clear on the different efforts that we had. We are looking at, reevaluating some of our snowplow routes and some of those things. We're also looking at, as we move into budgeting timeframe, over the years, we used to have a couple other equipment operators, and that in the last 20 years, when those people retired or moved on, we didn't backfill them. So, it may be time to relook that, along with the fact that we've struggled to hire some of our part-time people in the summer. So it may be appropriate now to look at hiring some people to help in the winter, but then also cover down on some of those part-time to backfill what we're not filling in our jobs for our part-time people to serve as truck drivers and other work that we've got budgeted but aren't going to expend because we don't have applicants.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to take another look at that. What I heard repeatedly from folks that are living out in the rural areas is that they totally get that you prioritize the metro area county roads. Davies High School is just off 81, but obviously those traffic counts are going to be greater than, the further you go out into the rural county, until you get to the hiccups, which would be Northern Cass, which was a huge one. And, I don't know who makes a decision to have, obviously you make a decision to have a tournament on a Saturday a year ahead of time probably. And the tournament went on, whether that was a good idea or not. I'm glad I don't have to make the decision when not to have a tournament or when to open the courthouse or school or whatever it might be. But, is there a way when something like that is going on, and we know something like that's going on, that's a high traffic area on a Saturday. And I got calls, from Kindred School District as well. And that was more of a timing thing. I think you guys were out 12 hours that day probably, and then things started getting slushy. And, before they got back to scraping off the road, would have been ideal. It had already frozen, and now you've got just an icy mess for the rest of the winter until it gets slushy again anyway. And so I think, that was an opportunity to get some part-time people in there. you know, in those instances, when, you know, your crew is stretched, you know, maybe that would be, you know, hopefully you could take a look at that. I just wonder if there's some pieces to the puzzle we could just move around and maybe it would work a little bit better.
And Madam Chair, one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, we have this priority map that's been around for about 20 years. And a lot of the priority really, it comes that, you know, when we've got 5 motor graders, 2 in Argusville, 2 in Davenport, and 1 in Buffalo. And those cover predominantly the gravel roads out in those areas. Everything else is a snowplow that comes out of our West Fargo shop. So the reason that County Road 17 between West Fargo and Harwood has a higher priority is, well, it's 5 minutes out the door and you're north of West Fargo, versus if you have to drive all the way to Gardner and then start going across County Road 26, you're driving a half hour before you even get to your start point. So we're looking at probably just getting rid of that map, because it really doesn't set a priority. It's more of a time distance relationship. It's color coding what is the closer places to get to from our Fargo shop versus saying this is, because we're not saying, well, County Road 26 between Gardner and Hunter is a lower priority than County Road, like I said, 17 between. It's just the person that drives up to Gardner on I-29, they're taking County Road 17. So by the time they get to Harwood, the person that left in front of them has already plowed that route. Well, it's done before they even get there. You know, and so it's a time distance factor. And you know, at one point we did have 2 motor graders at Buffalo. Is that something to relook, or maybe having a plow operate out of that for a little more response? So those are types of things that I think, you know, and as well as, you know, is there some collaboration or changing up to have a couple operators that work more evening? And one of the challenges too is it's easy in the metro area to do plowing for the cities when they've got streetlights. I'm not comfortable sending my operators out if it's blizzard conditions, the interstates are closed, and it's 9 o'clock at night. I don't feel safe sending people out in those types of conditions either. So it's a balance of what's the safety of our operators and what's reasonable. You know, I'm going to send them out if the sheriff needs them to go, you know, punch through some drifts to get to get a emergency vehicle in or something like that. But just to be driving routes because you know, if there is a school event, but I think there is some opportunity to do some more collaboration between Northern Cass and, you know, Kindred and Central Cass.
And my understanding is we only have the capability to close one road, and that's 10. So
And this is one
my
other thing, Madam
understanding
Chair.
also is
Right.
when I-29 and 94 close down, people will take the secondary roads, which that's,
And one of the,
we can't solve stupid, I guess.
thank you for bringing that up, Madam Chair, because well, one, you're right, unfortunately, because on the Kindred Road, County Road 15, there was a truck driver with California plates wearing flip-flops and shorts and a T-shirt, stuck in the middle of a blizzard because, yeah, you know, as you mentioned, Google Maps said that's a different route because the interstate was closed. Unfortunately, you know, as you pointed out, right now we can only close Highway 10 because that's where we have gates, and it's not feasible to put gates and to try to have the sheriff and our staff run around. But the North Coast legislature just passed a law that I think will improve the ability to close roads. So we'll be working through with that the language of that law. But my understanding is the sheriff can just make a media announcement that all Cass County roads are closed for travel and give the time period. And then if someone's found stuck out there, then they can be ticketed, similar to if you drive around the barricades right now on the interstate or on that section of County Road 10. So I think it gives a little bit more tooth into the ability to close roads and say, based on the weather conditions, that that if the interstates are closed, 'cause that's the one problem is a lot of times people are saying, well, the interstate's closed, we're gonna take the county road, and our county roads aren't any better, and some cases, they're worse.
So Commissioner Grinberg brought up snow fences, and I notice when I'm traveling east of here, there's lots of snow fences, and they seem to be very effective. Do we put any up?
Madam Chair, we don't have any specific. We do, I know there's a living snow fence where, landowners can work with the soil conservation and put trees up. We have not gone out and done. We do coordinate with some landowners, and in some spots where, once we get a foot or so of snow on the ground, we'll go out onto their field and pile snow, kind of put a windrow of snow out, and that helps kind of act as a snow fence. Those are kind of in specific areas where we've collaborated with landowners and where we've had historic spots, but we haven't gone out and put up 200 yards of snow fence along a certain area.
I know there's
It's
real
just-
science to it. I just wonder if that wouldn't be an effective aid, if it would be cost effective. I'm just throwing it out
And
there.
I think one thing there, Madam Chair, is that when you look at the cost benefit on the interstate with the volumes of traffic, it's the cost to put it in versus the benefit for that total number of vehicles traveled, versus some of our roads to put that in one day, which is getting traveled on I-94 between here and the Twin Cities is probably more traffic than months of traffic on some of our county roads. So it is a balance.
Well, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Commissioner Peterson?
Madam Chair, thank you. Whether we get 40 inches or 140 inches, we should always be looking for opportunities to collaborate with our neighbors, whether it's school districts, cities, counties, townships. I would caution us to react too swiftly to an anomaly. We had a lot of snow, we had a lot of cold, and that affects people differently, and it's different winters every time. But reinventing, and I'm not saying you are, Mr. Benson, but potentially reinventing the way we do snow removal and maintenance of roads, I would say don't do that. And here's my logic. By that logic, everyone here should be looking at increasing the thickness of their walls to a foot thick, full of insulation, because we had a super duper cold winter. Well, the math doesn't work on that. That's why we have 6-inch 2x6 studs with a little bit of insulation and leaky windows. Pay a little bit more for heat, and away we go. This was a terrible winter. We had bad roads in town, too. I've talked about that during prior meetings because of the reality of what this winter was. Whether it was Fargo and Bismarck, I had firsthand experience of roads simply being either partially, lanes of roads anyway, partially or almost fully blocked in the example I talked about in Bismarck. So, Mr. Benson, please look at collaborating. Great idea, wonderful. But please don't reinvent the way we've done snow removal for the last 150 years. We've done a good job. We had a bad winter. Guess what? It's going to be fine next winter. And if it's not, we'll work through that too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Well, I just would finish up, and I see Blaine and Tom are in the audience, and thank you guys for your work. I know the sheriff really appreciated your help this winter as well. It's a tough winter, kind of thankless, so you really are appreciated. And thank you for the update, appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Okay, item number 6. Mr. Prochniak, our emergency manager, is going to talk about burn restrictions.
Madam Chair, fellow commissioners, I guess we went from snow, wind, and now we go to fire. I think that kind of resembles a band sometime in the past, but a little off on the title. House
Are you
Bill.
offering to sing?
No, I'm not. Madam Chair, House Bill 1053 looked at addressing some language, specifically changing burn ban to burn restrictions. Our ordinance, obviously 2005-3, Cass County ordinance, uses similar language from the state in which we would need to change burn ban to burn restriction. So simply I come before you, just as the memo indicates, to answer any question. One of the things that was discussed as a point of clarity and why some of this legislation was considered. Obviously, there were a number of different bills that cleaned up some different language and made it consistent. That was one of them. But the other one was, it was interesting, there was a little bit of feedback provided. In many of the counties use a very similar wording in their ordinance. And in that wording, they adopt language from the state where it talks about open fires. And in short, open fires get banned, but then there's an exception. And that exception is your nice little fire pit, right? Or you can burn in your regulated drum if you have some property out in the country, as long as it's a certain distance away from your house. So to have a burn ban ordinance caused a little bit of confusion because everybody thought that that was so all-encompassing. And a lot of fire chiefs, particularly rural fire chiefs, well, we have a burn ban, chief. They're not supposed to be burning at all. Well, not exactly. So this is an effort to also try to make that a little easier to understand. So essentially, as the memo to everybody here talks about, it's simply a consideration of a first reading for an ordinance change of Cass County Ordinance 2005-3, updating that verbiage. I'd be glad to answer any questions for you.
Questions? Will there be different levels then of restrictions that, you know, if you're coming before us, that you would, when we make a proclamation?
Madam Chair, fellow commissioners, nothing from that end will change as opposed to the current ordinance, because that obviously hasn't been updated yet. So, and generally, there's a lot of different steps. I think there's like a half a dozen different steps that have to look at the ordinance specifically, which would trigger me coming before you to ask for the enactment of a burn ban or eventually a burn restriction. For example, the rural responders, rural fire chiefs, calling my cell phone, saying, hey, we're running ragged here. And that, quite frankly, is one that we put a lot of weight in. Their resources are limited, and we can't have them trying to put these fires out, grass fires and ditch fires and things like that till they're blue in the face. So none of those triggering mechanisms would change. And the rest of the current ordinance would remain the same. Hopefully I answered your question there.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or motion?
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Brightling,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Grinberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Capitan,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherling.
Yes.
And Madam Chair, if I may, just so that you are aware, the second hearing on this would be June 15th, scheduled for June 15th, 2023.
Okay. Do I need to open a public hearing
I
for
think,
this? No.
no,
We'll have to open it at the second.
at the second? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Making sure we're in. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. All right. The next item was removed, so we'll go on to the vouchers. Commissioner Grinberg.
Madam Chair, I reviewed the vouchers and nothing appeared unusual, so I'd move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor say, or no, excuse me, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Sherling,
Yes.
Commissioner Brightling,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Grinberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Capitan.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Committee reports. Let's start with Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Had a busy couple of weeks. Met with the Insurance Reserve Board, and I have now taken on the lead role there. So I'm now the president of Insurance Reserve. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully, going to be controlling our costs. And one of the things I can share in a different meeting, if you want me to, take a lot of time regarding what we're finding. And it's interesting because we took over what's called the Fire and Tornado Fund, and that was this autonomous little widget or beast that existed within our insurance commissioner's portfolio. And when we took that over, we discovered, I think I've shared previously, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in unprotected property. And we are still discovering more. The university campuses are in excess of, I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think the number we discovered on between NDSU, UND, et cetera, was $800 million of uninsured property. So we are having some discoveries, and it's a good thing for all of us in the state. And that doesn't mean the insurance rates are going to skyrocket, right? It just means that we're now protecting things correctly. We're finding building additions at schools, and luckily, I think we have an amazing team here in Cass. But some of our team members statewide don't have the due diligence or foresight to protect their property. So it's been quite an interesting experience. On the 8th, I think I hope a number of us were able to listen into the legislative wrap-up call. If not, it is recorded. It's worth your time. It is a good couple hours. But in lieu of listening to the radio or something to that effect, or when you're sitting around clicking your mouse at your job, I think it would behoove you to take a couple seconds just to have that on in the background and listen to Mr. Aaron Burst and team give his presentation. Another thing, Mayor Mahoney and I met with our LSS, which is now LIRS, team members, and we've been given briefings quarterly, as some of us have been able to attend. Commissioner Breitling, I think, usually jump on that call too, and I think Commissioner Capitan, I think you've been on one or two as well, but sat down with them and the management team in their offices in South Fargo. It was great because I was typically, as always, a little bit late, and Mayor Mahoney had to leave a little bit early, which is also typical too. So Tim covered me for the first 10 minutes, and then he left, and I covered for the rest. But the story I want to share is this. So we're looking at upwards of 120, 130 people coming in next year. That number may accelerate a little bit, but probably not. And that number is quantified or determined by the president, and based on that is the number of people we get. But here's the story. So I was they shared with me a story about a refugee family, a family of 9, mommy, daddy, 7 babies. And they have been waiting for correspondence from Cass County Social Services team for 2 months. And the struggle isn't our team. The struggle is the ability for them to communicate with our team. And I've shared this with Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson shared this with our social services director. And I hope we're going to come to a resolution. Our team is amazing. I think I've said that repeatedly throughout my 11 years of service here. And I think the hang up is the way we're doing things at the state. So know that our friends in our annex are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. I think, though, that it might be time to evolve what the state's perception of what our job may be, and getting those folks in contact with the folks that can help them out would be prudent. But again, it needs a little bit of cooperation, as the word I'm going to pick right now. It needs some cooperation from our friends in Bismarck to allow our team here to do their job as they did in the past so well. So I think right now I'm off to Western Interstate. That's where I'm at right now, getting ready to go. Western Interstate region. I think it's important. As president of the Association of Counties, I want to be here anyway, but it's for us to be engaged and involved. It is a good thing. And Madam Chair, I'm going to stop there. I could keep going. So awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Then we'll move on to Robert, please. Robert Wilson.
Commissioner, members of the board, as part of our strategic plan, sent out a reach out to school superintendents, administrators here in the county last week about being available for outreach and engagement, really whatever best suits their needs, however we can foster that engagement, learning opportunities about the county. That letter went out Friday afternoon, and within about 30 minutes, we had a couple of responses. We've had a few more today, so just within really 2 business days, we've had more than half the local school organizations respond. And so I think that's a pretty good rate of feedback. We'll obviously track that and engage as it's most helpful to them in the next school year. Have some ideas that look to do something similar with the college age groups and engage. And that letter I intend to get out either later this week or next week. And so I'm very encouraged by that. For your own information, I know the Fargo Parks District has an agenda item scheduled for their meeting tomorrow to consider a counteroffer on the RDJ building. So we'll keep you updated of how that comes out and any information that I get back from them. In one of our rotational meetings earlier today, we mentioned that we do have a pretty good turnout or sign up for the NACO National Convention later this summer in July. And part of the responsibility of being there is on state-by-state delegation, and then the largest organizations within a state, there's a voting delegate for the business meeting. Commissioner Peterson has been our delegate in the past and is nominated, has been identified to be the voting delegate for this coming session. And for those who haven't attended, those business meetings get kind of interesting. Ultimately, that's where they select the next person in line for the presidency. And you've got geographic things that fall into place. You've got essential campaigning through the various conferences leading up to that, and it's interesting in terms of shaping the priorities of the organization, but also is key that and key as far as being involved, because if you're the nominated person and you don't make it to the convention floor that day, you don't vote, and that's happened to some of our other partners in the past, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I know it won't this year, but that's just one of the dynamics that goes on and of how representation is chosen, and it's pretty interesting. There was a discussion at the last building committee meeting about new judges, judge support staff, and court staff that were approved in this past legislature will be coming on board beginning with the beginning of the new state fiscal year this summer. Had a chance to walk through the court areas with court administrator Chris Iverson and Gene Gartner, and I think we should be able to accommodate the needed judge chambers and support staff offices fairly easily. We've got some areas in the clerk's office that will accommodate most of the new FTEs coming on board. So, you know, when I first heard the numbers that had been added, I was a little shell-shocked. But walking through, I think we're going to be able to accommodate these needs with a couple of minor remodels. When I say remodels, probably adding a couple of walls and just making sure that heating and air are controlled and directed in the appropriate ways. But I think that's going to be a little bit easier lift than I was initially anticipating. That concludes my report and be open for any questions.
Can I ask where talks are as far as the courtrooms go for the judges?
Well, that is, I know we look to circle back to courtroom, potential for an additional courtroom at the next building committee meeting. You know, Commissioner Peterson and I met last week, and so I've got an idea of what he may be thinking. I certainly don't want to steal his thunder, but also don't want to go beyond what we may want to put together in a briefing memo and you know, information that we can distribute systematically.
Anything else?
Concludes my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Brightman.
I have no committee report. Well, I should add that you asked earlier when the new director of MetroCog was going to start, and that was the 8th of May. And he will be attending his first policy board meeting this Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, State's Attorney.
We've also been busy these last couple of weeks. I had an opportunity to go over and tour the Red River Children's Advocacy Center. Since I was there the last time, they've added and remodeled some of their spaces, and I think they're doing a really good job at serving the children in our community. Last week, they also hosted their annual conference. I had several of my staff attend the conference. It's good CLE, it's good continuing legal education for my staff, and it's also very close, so it's cost effective as well. I will be going to an additional conference starting on Sunday, I leave. It's for the National Consortium on Racial and Ethnic Fairness in the Courts. I was able to get some money from the law school to be able to attend, and something that's kind of cool about it is currently one of the North Dakota judges is serving as the head of that national organization. So I'm excited to see what I can learn and bring back. Sort of ties into what I had reported to the commission last time around as far as the Native American Commission coming in and meeting with my staff. It was the fullest our conference room has been in several years. Very good turnout. They had a lot of good information, and I think that that partnership will work well and will be serving the Indigenous community pretty well, I'm confident. We did have a lunch and volunteer event for my office with Hope Blooms, and we were able to distribute several bouquets that we had put together to the Bethany Nursing Home a couple weeks ago. It was well attended. I think people really liked it, and it was a nice way to build some relationships over a lunch hour. We also had Restore visit our office. Restore is sort of like the probation officers for unsupervised probation. They're the organization that makes sure that people are following through with things like chemical dependency evaluations and domestic violence assessment and inventory. With Birch retiring from our office, that leaves a position open on the Restore board. I've asked, and Nick Samuelson from my staff has accepted the opportunity to serve on that board once Birch is done with his term, which is within, I think, the next couple of months. We did host a meeting in our office with Chief Zabolski of the Fargo Police Department and several of the leadership in his office. We covered a number of topics. The most interesting probably for this group, though, is we further talked through evidence.com, which is our online gathering of evidence, digital evidence, including recordings, photographs, other, the biggest one is body-worn camera footage. What we're running into is there's a disconnect between what is put into their system on their end and what is able to be shared with our office. And what the result is that there's a lot of evidence that's sitting out in evidence.com that we aren't able to capture because it hasn't been shared with us. So the discussion sort of led to Chief Zabolski saying that what he has seen is that prosecutors' offices have hired a full-time person, and their job is to just go through reports on a regular basis, cases on a regular basis, and make sure that all of the information is pulled off of evidence.com and added to the appropriate cases within a prosecution office. Our position was sort of, well, if a prosecutor's office can hire that, why shouldn't the police department be able to hire that? Because they're the ones who are generating the evidence and giving it to us. Where that was left is that we are going to be going over to the Fargo Police Department because that's the method that their prosecutor uses. However, they're talking about probably, a few hundred to maybe a few thousand cases, or not even 1,000 cases. My office is dealing with over 8,000 cases a year, and the vast majority of those are coming from the Fargo Police Department. So it remains to be seen whether that is something that we would push for hiring someone new, or if we would push Fargo Police Department to consider hiring someone new, or possibly combining that role with both of us contributing some money. So that's definitely something we'll be looking at, and as we're formulating our budget, trying to figure out exactly how that would need to be. As far as new positions go, with Mr. Wilson letting the group know that 2 new judges have been added. That will mean new court hearings that need to be covered for my staff. Already, we're pretty much tapped out as far as the work that we can do and also providing coverage for all of those hearings. This morning was a good example where we had, I don't know, close to 20 probably in custodies. We had multiple attorneys. Some of them were supposed to be in 3 courtrooms at the same time. As we're getting more serious cases, that's also resulting in more lengthy court hearings, and the attorneys who are actually assigned those cases to handle from start to finish having to personally appear in front of the judge to handle their own cases. So this morning in the courtroom I was in, at one time I had 3 other attorneys waiting for hearings just from my staff. So I think that it's entirely possible that I'll be coming in front of the commission and asking for another full-time attorney, especially once we figure out what the new court calendar will look like with the addition of those 2 new judges and the division of some of the court dockets into more hearings. I just don't see that we're going to be able to absorb those 2 more judges and that caseload without trying to find a way to provide some relief for my staff. And as far as those new positions, where would I put them? So Roger Christensen came to my office today. We walked around the 3rd floor in particular, one half of the 3rd floor. If you're not familiar with it, I have probably 20 some staff members. The other half of the floor, I have 5. And there is some dead space in the middle that we could be utilizing more efficiently than we are right now. And I think we've got some pretty cost-effective ways that we could look at doing that. In particular, we have a file room, and Ms. Peters actually was the one who came up with this idea a few years ago of pushing some of the files forward and being able to partition it off to make 2 offices. And we already have those temporary walls. The county already owns them, so it wouldn't be that expensive to make those changes. Also, Mr. Christensen thought that there would be a way to move around some of our cubicles to come up with at least 1 more cube space. Currently, we have 2 interns in what essentially was a closet. When we have 2 law clerks, that means that we don't have space for an intern, which is a requirement for our federal grant, for our victim witness coordinators, and the domestic violence cases that we serve. So I think at a minimum, I need at least 1 more office space, even if we don't add any additional staff. Lastly, 20 years ago this month, Cass County got its first adult drug court. And we have 2 adult drug courts, 1 juvenile drug court. I expect within the next couple of months, we will have a community celebration to acknowledge those 20 years of what I think is pretty exceptional work in helping people to break the cycle of addiction and become law-abiding, productive members of society again. And Vogel has been kind enough to sponsor a celebration just for our participants. So that's all I've got.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Hagan. Commissioner Bright, Captain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This past May 4th, I attended the Sheriff's Annual Awards ceremony, and I found it interesting that, and I brought it up, we had several people, 6 of them that received the Silver Star Award, and those, without having to belabor everybody with what they get, it's a pretty high award. And we had 4 or 5 that received the Life Saving Award, and I don't think that's ever been brought up before this commission before. And several of them that won the Sheriff's Medal, 2 of which are Jason Benson and Jim Prosniak for work that they had done in their field. I think it has to do with their work as far as the storms and that thing. But I thought that was essential. And he had a reserve deputy, a guy who just volunteers his time, who was the Deputy of the Year, and by receiving that award, Brady Herring, I think his name is. He gets to go to the National Law Enforcement Conference. So there's, I mean, the annual awards, I thought it was interesting, and for some reason I find that none of these people have ever been brought before the commission, and I think it's a worthy enough award that some of these people have received, that at least we should acknowledge them here. I know the sheriff does at his awards banquet, but I was rather amazed and rather touched with some of the awards that passed out and the numbers of people that got them. I mean, some of those, like the Silver Star Award, that's above and beyond the call of duty and with severe risk to your own life. And there was a couple of those that were handed out. So, and 3 of them got Purple Hearts. Now, if it follows the military, Purple Heart, you have to be wounded. So, and a lot of these do follow the military awards type of thing. So I thought it was very interesting. That concludes my report.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you bringing that up. I was not aware of that. Maybe that's something we can follow up on and see if we can recognize them in some manner. Commissioner Grinberg.
Nothing to report.
Ms. Madriga.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you all for your reports. I attended a number of meetings, DA Planning, Diversion Authority Planning Committee. There's been some talk that you will hear, those of you on that board are going to hear more about some rather extensive fish mitigation. Our team has been working on for months, our team including Mr. Benson, and I think they found a solution. Of course, it's going to cost more money, and so we're going to be getting an updated finance plan, not because of that, but just because it's time to get an updated finance plan. So we can be looking forward to that in the next couple of months, because it's a lot of money that we're spending, and you know, certainly we want to be prudent with how those funds get dispersed. Just because the sales tax has been healthy doesn't mean that it always will be, and we want to be certainly have our eye on that carefully. The other, let's see, I'll be attending the North Dakota Association of Counties board meeting next week. I assume Commissioner Peterson maybe will be as well. And that concludes my report. So with that, is there any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay, item number 10.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you, Commissioner.